It's a welcome back. I know we are running a little behind, but I think we'll make up time by lunch. It's an honor and a pleasure to introduce to the audience of H2O World, the H2O community, Naren Gupta. Naren is founder of ISI Systems many years ago. Took that as took that to public, IPO'd it in the late 80s, and is founder of Nexus Venture, which is where H2O was conceived, almost on a PowerPoint. So our partnership with Nexus has been like the partnership with the Earth. So thank you for taking the time for a delightful kind of conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shri.
So we'll kick it off with the kind of the multidimensional themes we've had so far, which is founder, then founder of an investment, or one of the first of its kind, actually. It's a global fund exposing the same high caliber investors from the US to a new economy in India, globalization of India. And then, of course, seeing your children, such as founders like us, and children of your own, do their own companies and take them off. There are almost multiple generations of work here. Which parts are kind of the ones that have the sweetest memories?
Well, I would say every step has been sweet, and it is sweet because of the people you work with, and that really brings joy to every day of your life. And certainly bright people like you and others that we have had a privilege to work with over the last decade or so. I think the key here is that the technology continues to evolve, and you need to play the role that is most effective in that phase of technology development. So I would say every day is a day of discovery. Every day is a joy to be around people, and every day it's a joy because you learn from everybody around you. And I'm a permanent student, I would say, as much as I share my thoughts and ideas.
Perennial student.
Yeah.
So you've seen, obviously, the quantitative field emerge. Naren's astute mathematician himself, and for fun solves puzzles and plays mathematical games. And so it's so you've seen the almost 30 years of, the early days was the quantitative. What was, we think our lives were difficult, but when we compare it with the late 80s, when you're taking a quantitative company into the future, into public markets, what were some of the challenges faced then? And of course, open source. Naren is chairman of Red Hat, and you were also with TIBCO. How do you contrast the software dynamics from then and now?
I think that technology oftentimes is the easy part. It is getting the community to understand the impact that technology can have on their business. I still remember when I started the company, we used to make real-time operating system, real-time control. And I gave a talk at Ford Motors, 1983, on why software will transform the car. And most of the people said, well, that is not really likely. Software has very little to do with cars. We know how to design our fuel injection systems and so on. So I think bringing people along to see the power of technology, the impact of technology, is probably the biggest challenge, and something we need to do with your company as well, is get certainly senior management in the companies to see the power of AI and how it's going to be transformative for people.
And certainly AI has now crossed over the threshold of being a data science movement to mass movement, as evidenced in the audience here. What are things we can learn? Obviously, we have an open source H2O, and then I remember vividly some of our conversations. And there are now new flavors of open source we see out there where people have change licenses after releasing them. What are your thoughts on that front?
I think open source is key to global use of technology, and I think what open source has done more importantly than anything else is it has accelerated innovation. A guy and a gal in a garage can really work on new ideas at a very low cost, and that to me has been the biggest impact of open source. If you look across the board, every product that's open source has evolved faster and more rapidly and more in response to the needs of the community. And that to me is the real power of open source. Certainly, you are running, other people are running commercial ventures, and you need to have resources to continue to support the open source products. But the biggest power is accelerated innovation.
And how monetization is the next question. Obviously, distribution becomes such an easy aspect. That's the power of open source, marketing, building communities. Monetization models, and you've seen them emerge in different forms. And the quintessential example people take about that is Red Hat. And you've watched it closely. I mean, obviously, it's now IBM Red Hat. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on when you saw the rise of TIBCO and Red Hat in almost lockstep, and they had very different outcomes as well.
Well, the merger has not been consummated yet, so it's in the process and maybe take another 6 months. I think what you find in general is if you provide value to your customers, if you provide value to society, there is a mechanism to get paid for it. And Red Hat, we always had that view that we want to maximize the value to our customer, to our users, and we will get paid back in return. Now, you need to have specific models, obviously. Customers don't always want to pay you, even though they should. But that's a theme we have worked with. We are here at Red Hat to provide the maximum value to our customers, and we come up with various models that allow them, that empower them, that really motivate them to pay us. And this really worked out well. I mean, we are one of the fastest, Red Hat is one of the fastest growing company of its size.
I see some Red Hat customers in the audience.
Yes, and so I think it's you do the right thing, you will get compensated for it. So I think,
It's the way I've learned about it is taking a longer term perspective about it, as opposed to getting 2-year, 4-year, 6-year returns. Open source is a 10-year kind of outcome as opposed to just a few.
It's a longer cycle. It's a longer cycle, absolutely. But the cycle is also more powerful and more maintainable over even a longer period of time, because you are likely to stay ahead of the technology curve. And if you look at Red Hat, we have sort of stayed ahead of the curve on every technology cycle in the infrastructure. We stayed ahead in the clouds area. We stayed ahead in the container space, and we are going to JBoss, certainly that. So I think that is the power of what you are able to do with Red Hat as a company.
A lot of people, I was mingling with the folks in the break to see if anyone had a good question for you. And one of them was asking just a ton of philosophy and Indianness in the teams today and yesterday. How has that impacted you, one, and two, investing in and growing entrepreneurships in India versus growing entrepreneurs here of Indian origin? Was there any, what kind of challenges or uniquenesses did you observe?
Well, I think we tend to be fairly colorblind, I guess, But one thing I would say is that technology is a global phenomenon, more so than ever before. And a lot of it is driven by open source. India, China has very large community of open source developers and users, because it has driven the entry cost down. The US had an advantage in with the high entry cost, nobody else could afford that entry cost. So our view is that we are going to be creating a global community, whether it's AI or it is infrastructure. innovation can happen anywhere, will happen everywhere, and we need to be a part of that. And we need to be celebrating the globalness of technology. And what we talked about, the previous speaker talked about its impact on wildlife preservation, for example. I think it is so empowering for us that it has an impact both in terms of innovation and its use.
Nairobi has the third largest data science meetup group, right, in Kenya. Two of our grandmasters are from India, and I just met another in the hallway.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty global phenomenon at this point.
And we should embrace that phenomena because I think it helps everybody be a better citizen and be a better user of technology and a better, in terms of things that impact us. One of the things, that the way we think about how AI and technology is going to impact preservation of the environment. I'm a big fan of, probably a defining issue for our generation. And I think the only way we're going to solve that problem is through use of technology and in particular AI.
How do you see AI? You invested in us long before we were the second .ai domain, and so you've learned the feedback loops from our growth. How do you see AI impacting the next 5-10 years?
So maybe I'll say that what has happened, AI as a term was invented in the 50s, but it never really came to fruition. I think when you started the company, 2010, 2011, I think three mega trends happened, mega things happened, and which made AI really sort of available to everybody. First was cloud. It allowed a infinitely large pool of computing power as well as storage. And second thing, what I would call is the data explosion. The cell phones, one thing they did, and I think we talked about in the previous call, taking pictures. Everybody is a source of data today because we are carrying a smart device. And the third thing, which we talked about earlier, is awareness. I mean, you can say that IBM beating the Jeopardy expert was no big deal, but in the conscience of people in the community, it was a big deal because it was never thought possible. So the combination of let's say elastic compute power, data explosion, and awareness is really what, in my opinion, made AI potentially acceptable to a broad community. So it's like a perfect storm. I mean, we have been looking for this storm for a long time because I'm a real believer in the use of technology to make smart decisions. But I think there is a point early 2010 when all of these technologies were in the early stage, but really was an explosion caused by this perfect storm.
Yeah, certainly AlphaGo, AlphaFold, and now DeepMind has played a game, that strategy game as well.
Yeah. And AlphaGo, I think the thing about AlphaGo that it made certain moves that human experts did not think were rational. So you had to think about AI not simply making good decisions, but also potentially discovering new things. And that is the power. We are never going to be probably as good as human beings in terms of proving new theorems or things like that. But I think it is really an insight into what is possible. It discovered new moves that human beings thought were not even rational.
Absolutely. One of the lesser known aspects of, maybe known for us, is Naren's wife went on to build a company herself, Vinita, and took that to IPO. So it's a very it's pretty much you've encouraged everyone around you to go build companies. How does it feel to be now seeing her play in bridge and winning in those tournaments as well?
But I think I would say that one thing computers have not been able to do is bid to kind of win against bridge champions. So there is something for you to work on possibly, but there will be certain things that we do. And the reason it's a kind of a bridge is very mathematical, but it's also a certain amount of psychology and table presence, which I think computers have not been good at. I think the way I see it is that we have in all of us, more capabilities than we imagine. I think what we need the willpower and the attitude to potentially sort of harness that, and combined with what you are doing, Sri, is providing them, sort of a AI kind of tools that empower us to do even better. So, I would say that, it's a wonderful world for all of us, for all of you, as you know, and you can do things that were in the past were really unimaginable.
I think the rate of innovation has changed. I think every time math was unlocked, it unlocked another 100 years of innovation that happened with quantum mechanics, beginning of the last century, and I think we see now similar unlocking of new techniques.
And Sri, I'll say one thing is that I was never really surprised for a moment that, you know, Vinita was, my wife, was as successful as she is. I know the world was, because, you know, there was kind of a pretty set bias, I suppose, but I never really for a moment believed that, you know, this is the mid-'80s, that there is really no reason why there should be any difference. Or there should be any reason to believe there is any difference.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty convinced that if my own co-founder at home is one of the two co-founders for the company in many ways. He is certainly a strong, all our strength emerges from the source, the family. Parting thoughts for the budding entrepreneurs in the audience. I know you're a strong proponent of stick to the fundamentals. There are several folks in the audience who are CEOs of companies that are emergent.
I mean, if I were to say that, you know, I think the key is, you know, build teams that, you know, with members who you can trust and respect. And, you know, two of us can do a lot more than, you know, either of us can do, or three of us can do a lot more than. And I think at every step of the way, you know, I would say think broadly, but act narrowly and with focus. You know, I always encourage everybody and to continue to go into a lot of thought experiments. What if I had this goal? Could I really achieve that goal? Not act on those thought experiments. And I think that gives you a much better understanding of what is possible and what you should be doing. So think broadly, but act very narrowly, and be the best in whatever you're going to be, you know, acting on.
I think that is the popular version of it. Think globally, but act locally as well.
Okay, yeah, okay. That's even a better way to put it.
It's
Yeah.
a Stephen Boyd edition of locally linear methods.
Right.
But the manifold is still global.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the thing that you will notice in everything in life is that the progress, as you know, your startups and your company, the progress from day to day looks very small and really meaningless. But over weeks and months and years, it can become very transformative.
That's absolutely words of wisdom. Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience that we can answer?
Shri, I would also say that it has been a real pleasure to work with you and your team. And, you know, you're always thinking of new things and new ideas, and, you know, keeps me young and keeps me going with the kind of things you're doing.
We bring our set of problems to the table often, and those puzzles are easily solved for Naren. Oftentimes, my conversations with him are just half a minute to 2 minutes, so it's a pleasure to take such rich time from you. I think one of the things that I always enjoyed from working with Naren was his insights are penetrating, deep, crisp, and done, and that's a rare pearls of wisdom that we will hope to continue to take from you. So
Thanks.
thank you so much.
Yeah.